Welcome to 51 Stories. This week's short story is a cozy mystery in which a diner patron drops dead and a waitress suspects foul play. Here's this week's short story titled Rumor Has It, It's Murder. Mr. Dalton went beet red and sweaty, and next I looked, he was face down in his bowl of soup. I'm a good waitress. I rushed over to offer a napkin, but Mr. Dalton was dead. Heart attack. At least that's what the ambulance guys said when they rolled him out. Poor Mr. Dalton. The one time he came to eat with us common folks, the old crank ended up croaking in his dinner. Manny, the line cook, had just stood there, staring at the mess, horrified. Flanagan offered me to take the night off, but I knew he'd dock my pay. There's no cutting shifts for single mothers, so I stuck around. Besides, everyone else did. Rumor folk are hard like that. Once the ambulance was gone, it was business as usual. Had it happened back in the city, there would have been a whole mess. Police, health inspectors, the whole 9 yards. Not in Rumor, though. Sheriff was in and out, then that was that. The richest man in town was dead, and life moved on. Not for little nosy Harper Willows, though. Might be I watched too much TV, but the whole thing didn't sit right with me. I only worked Flanagan's Diner in the off-season. Most of the year, I made pretty good money as a maid up at Mr. Dalton's ski resort. I'd been up there, getting a couple of things from my locker a few days before Dalton kicked the bucket. As I passed his office, I heard him arguing with his lawyer on the phone. It got pretty loud, something about the future of the resort. Mr. Dalton was changing his will. It seemed important enough to tell my friend down at the station. I swung by the sheriff's office on my way to work, pretending I was dropping off a couple of books I borrowed from Winston. He's just a part-time deputy. He's really the chemistry teacher at the school. In a small town like Rumor, you ship in where you can. You also have to accept that everyone's got their nose in your business. Winston's single, I'm single. I don't think anyone even considered I was there to talk about Dalton. So, you think someone killed him? Winston grinned, pouring coffee. Maybe his lawyer, I said. His lawyer. Winston's eyebrows nearly touched his hairline. I heard them talking about changing Dalton's will. Hold on. I thought you said Dalton wanted to change his will. I shut up, considering it. I think you need to learn how motives work there, Nancy Drew. Then maybe someone else benefits. Winston shook his head. Look, you don't know that he actually changed it. Besides, Dalton brought more money and opportunities to this town than anyone. Ain't nobody dumb enough to kill our golden goose. But everyone hated that guy. Sure did. Myself included, Winston nodded. And isn't it a bit suspicious that the one time he comes to eat at the diner, he ends up dead? The guy had a heart attack. I think you need to let this go. Mom didn't name me Harper for nothing. Winston sighed, shooting me a smile. I need to finish up here. I have class in an hour, but tell you what, I promise to get a hold of the toxicology report as soon as it comes in. That should put your mind at ease. Great. I'll sniff around the diner for clues. The look on Winston's face was priceless. I just grinned. When I got to work, Manny and the boys were finishing up prep in the kitchen. I turned the radio up and wiped the tables, set the condiments, refilled the caddies and napkins, slowly working my way over to the booth where Mr. Dalton had sat the night before. Flanagan had been quick to clean up, but when I crouched under the table, I found what I was looking for. A thick streak of dried soup had run down the wall. I took a fresh rubber glove from my apron pocket and wiped the crust into it. What are you doing under there? I tied the glove off, slipping it into my apron. Huh? I said, getting back up. It was Manny. I hadn't heard him. Oh, there's soup on the wall. Don't want it to stink up the place. He didn't say anything, wiping his hands on a rag. Poor Mr. Dalton, I said, shaking my head. Manny gave a curt nod. How you holding up, sugar? I said. What? You just looked real shook up yesterday. He hung his head, his shoulders sagging, with a sigh. Seeing the old man like that just messed me up. I think it did a number on all of us, Manny. He nodded. I gotta get back to the kitchen. And I need to finish up. You sure you're all right? Don't worry about it. Thanks, Miss Willows. I think I saw Manny wipe his cheek as he walked back to the kitchen. I pretended not to notice, wiping the table and the seat cushion clean. There was a new tear in the vinyl, a dime-sized hole where the yellow foam poked through. This place was falling apart. I got the patching tape from behind the counter and fixed it up before stepping outside for a smoke. I texted Miranda and asked her to come by. I know a mother shouldn't encourage her daughter to skip class, but I needed her to get the soup glove to Winston ASAP. It was a terrible thought, but if my hunch was right, the murder weapon was in that glove. As I stood finishing my cigarette out front, I heard the back door slam. Curious, I went around the corner and bumped right into Manny's mom. Florence! Harper! I loved Florence. She was in her 50s, but still looked like she'd slid off a magazine cover into the real world. She'd shown me the ropes up at the resort when I started out. How's life at the hospital? Oh, long hours, good pay, she said with a smile. It's never too late to get your degree. Degrees ain't never been my thing, I said, snuffing out my cigarette against the wall. Stop it, you're a clever girl, Florence scoffed. If I can do it, so can you. I laughed. Maybe I should give it a shot. Who knows if there will be any work come ski season? Florence's face hardened, her thin eyebrows in a knot. Because of Dalton? Don't you worry about it. There's someone in line to take that old cabron's place. I laughed again. Your son seems to be the only one who feels bad for that old miser. Emanuelito's a good man. Soft heart. It really upset him, that business with Dalton, she said, looking at the ground. Then she smiled back up at me. I just came down here to bring him his insulin, so distracted, that boy. Brought him some cuernos too, even though he's not supposed to. They're his favorite. Can you make sure he doesn't eat all of them? Oh, you can count on me. I love your baking. I hugged Florence goodbye and was just about to step inside when I heard a bike bell behind me. Mom! Miranda skidded to a halt in the gravel parking lot. What's up? I gave her my best apologetic smile, then made sure Florence was out of earshot before I fished a tied-up rubber glove out of my apron. Hey, honey, can you be a doll and take this back to school? Make sure Winston, Mr. Marshall, gets it. Miranda looked at me. That's the big emergency? Sorry, I know I use that word a lot. Please, tell him it's soup. She wrinkled her nose as I handed her the glove. If this is some weird grown-up thing, I don't want to be a part of it. Just get it to him, all right? And don't open it. I owe you. She perked up. Owe me how? Just get it to him. Can I get that jacket I showed you when we... Miranda will talk when I get home. Fine. Thank you. I pecked her on the cheek and went back inside. I wanted to keep an eye on Emanuelito. One might have expected Flanagan's to have a slow night, given that one of our customers had just died, but it was business as usual. No one seemed to care. It was a Friday, which meant reservations. I was checking the bookings when I got curious. There had actually been a reservation for Dalton's booth the previous day. Table for two. Had he been supposed to meet someone? As usual, Flanagan was riding me and the other waitress pretty hard, so I just jotted down the booking info. Later that night, I just stepped inside our apartment when my phone rang. It was Winston. Yes?
Thanks for the soup.
You're welcome.
I shipped it to the lab for analysis.
Ugh. How long's that's gonna be?
Couple of weeks. Did some experimenting on my own, though.
Which is why I like you.
Easy, Tiger. High school labs aren't equipped for this stuff, but we've got rats.
Winston, you didn't.
Don't worry. The subject is very much alive.
So, no secret ingredient?
Well, there are a lot of factors at play here, but I'd say no.
Huh.
You sound disappointed.
I was. Sorry, I guess I just have a lively imagination.
Which is why I like you.
I smiled. Easy, Tiger. Miranda stepped out in the hall, raising an eyebrow. I gotta go. Talk to you later. The next day, I was downtown with Miranda buying her a much too expensive denim jacket when Winston sent me a text. All it said was, "You were right. Puncture wound." I gave Miranda some cash for lunch and texted Winston to meet me outside the school. It was raining out. When I got there, I hopped in his pickup. "This brings me back," he said as I got in. "Huh?" "Hiding out in my truck in the school parking lot, pretty girl in the passenger seat." I laughed. "Winston Marshall, I don't believe for a second that there were ever any pretty girls in your truck." Ouch. "All right, deputy, what's this wound?" He scratched his stubbled chin. "Dalton had a puncture wound, left cheek." I nodded my eyebrows. "Wouldn't the ambulance guys have seen that?" Winston shot me a crooked smile. "Left butt cheek." I stared at him, my mind suddenly racing. "What about the toxicology report?" He sighed. "That'll still be a while." "What kind of poison would make it look like a heart attack?" He shrugged. "A bunch of them. The coroner said that between the eyewitness reports and what the ambulance guy said, it sounded like he'd just had really low blood sugar and the old ticker punched out." "Low blood sugar," I repeated. "What's wrong?" he said, looking at me funny. I fished a crumpled up Post-it out of my pocket. "What's that?" "Dalton had a reservation for 2, I said, punching the number into my phone. Then I stopped. I already had that number saved to a contact in my phone book. "What's wrong?" I stared at the name. "I'm not sure yet. Can you give me a ride?" Winston drove me up past Whisper Creek and the mill, all the way out to the trailer park. I'd actually rented a place there for a few months when I first came out to Rumor, before my deadbeat ex started paying his child support and I could afford an apartment. This was years ago now. Miranda was just a toddler. I still knew the place well, though, guiding Winston down the rows of boxy trailer homes, anxiously clutching my phone. At least it had stopped raining. "This one," I said, and he pulled over next to the mailbox. It was white with a floral pattern. I took a deep breath before passing it. I went up and knocked on a metal door. When it swung open a few seconds later, Florence looked surprised to see me. Then her eyes went to Winston, standing there in his uniform. Her expression changed. "Harper," she tried, but her heart wasn't in it. Mine sank into the pit of my stomach. "Florence," I said, forcing a smile. "Mind if we come in?" She didn't say anything, just stepped aside. Winston gave me a confused look, but went along with it. "What are you doing here?" Florence said, fussing in the kitchen of the little trailer home. "Perfect timing. I just baked more cuernos." I politely declined when she offered some fresh out the oven. Winston reached for one, but I grabbed his hand. Florence stared at me. "What is this?" she said. "Florence," I began, not sure what to say. "Where's Manny?" "At work. He always goes in early on Saturdays, you know that." I decided to gamble. "Was Mr. Dalton Manny's father?" "Excuse me?" I swallowed hard. "You said there was someone next in line to take over the resort. Is Manny about to inherit Mr. Dalton?" Now, Winston grabbed my wrist. "Harper, I don't think—" "Manny's innocent," Florence blurted out. "He's a good boy. He knew that Cabron was his father, but he never told anyone. He had nothing to do with it." Winston stiffened next to me. "Nothing to do with what?" he asked. Florence looked at us, setting the pan down. Her eyes were tearing up. "I didn't expect this to happen so quickly," she said, suddenly pale and shaking. Me and Winston just stared at her as she slumped down on the built-in seats across from the little kitchen. "I found your reservation," I said, "and the tear in the cushion in the booth." Florence just nodded and hung her head. You don't know how he treated us. He's a millionaire, and his only son is living in a trailer park with his mother." "What did you do, Florence?" Winston said. She looked up at us. "I got my son what he deserves," she said, smiling through her tears. "I only did what was right." To her credit, she didn't struggle. She just followed Winston out to the truck. And to Winston's credit, he didn't share any details of her confession with me. I actually went to the hearing. I don't know, I wanted to show my support somehow, I guess. I found it oddly admirable how honest she was. On the stand, Florence told the truth about everything. She'd managed to convince a doctor at the hospital to do a paternity test. Illegally, of course. It wasn't admissible in court, but it didn't have to be. It had been enough to help her finally convince Mr. Dalton to accept Manny as his legitimate son. She'd even gotten him to change his will. Florence invited Dalton to Flanagan's that night to meet Manny and make amends. The only catch was that she had no intention of waiting another decade or two for the old man to finally take care of his son financially. She'd come by earlier that day to check up on Manny, which is when she hid a syringe with insulin in the seat of the booth. When Dalton sat down where she'd instructed him to sit for their meetup, he'd been injected, probably thinking he'd just stuck himself on a nail or something. Moments later, he'd gone into cardiac arrest. Florence had come back the next day, bringing Manny his insulin shots and freshly baked kernels. She'd intended to just get the syringe out of the cushion, but she'd seen me in the parking lot and ripped it out, explaining the tear I'd found. Florence confessed she hadn't counted on anyone raising any questions until the reading of the will. By then, she'd be ready to take the fall. I had just figured things out a bit sooner than she'd anticipated. Manny was a wreck in court, of course. Sure, he'd just legally inherited a fortune, but in a way, he'd lost both his parents. Winston left me out of his report, stating he'd gotten an anonymous tip that led to the questioning. Even though my meddling led to Florence's confession, I might have just as likely messed the whole thing up had she intended to get away with it. I didn't care about credit anyway. Manny reached out, offering me a pretty good job at the resort. I turned it down. Didn't feel right. At least not right now. I served tables at Flanagan's that winter. Manny went in as a partner and put some money up for renovations. We've got a whole new interior, leather seats. I'm still not sure about small town life. For all the community and rumor, you might just end up face down in your soup one day, with no one rushing to help you. All right, that was Rumor Has It, It's Murder. If you like this story, I've got a bunch of other short stories on the channel. feel free to check them out. I got a horror playlist that's pretty rad, and these that I really recommend. So hope you enjoy it. See you in the next one. All hail the eternal Storyboros.